Hi, friends. Welcome back. Today, I'm going to share with you one of my favorite ways to learn English, using stories. Stories are not just fun. They can help you remember new words, improve your listening, and make learning feel natural. I'll tell you my own experiences and give you tips that you can start using today. Before we begin, please remember to click the like button if you enjoy this video and subscribe so you won't miss any of my future English learning tips. Now, let's get started. Chapter 1: How I Discovered the Power of Stories for Learning English. I still remember the day I first tried learning English with stories. It was a warm afternoon, and I was sitting at my desk, feeling tired after hours of grammar exercises. My notebook was full of sentences, but my head felt empty. I could write the rules, but when I tried to speak, I froze. I knew the problem. I was studying English, but I was not living it. That day, I decided to try something different. Instead of opening my grammar book, I picked up a short story in English. It was a children's story, simple, colorful, and full of pictures. I told myself, I will just read one page. But after the first page, I wanted to know what happened next. I kept reading until I finished the whole story. I didn't understand every word, but I understood the feeling, the characters, and the main events. Something changed in my mind. I realized that stories could help me remember English without forcing myself to memorize. I wasn't just learning, I was enjoying. Why stories work for learning English. From that moment, I started to think about why stories felt so powerful. I understood a few reasons. 1, stories have context. When I learn new words from a word list, they feel cold and lonely. But when I meet these words inside a story, they have friends, other words, situations, emotions. For example, learning the word forest from a dictionary is one thing, but meeting forest in a sentence like, "The princess walked through the dark forest," makes it easier to remember. I can imagine the trees, the darkness, and maybe some danger. 2, stories are emotional. Our brains love emotions. When a story makes me laugh, feel sad, or feel curious, I remember it better. I once read a short story about a boy who lost his dog. I almost cried when the dog came back. After that, I could never forget the phrase "came back" because it was connected to my feelings. 3, stories repeat language naturally. In a good story, some words and phrases repeat again and again. For example, in fairy tales, you often see "once upon a time" or "happily ever after." In detective stories, you hear clues, suspect, and solve the case many times. This repetition helps me remember without making me bored. 4, stories make learning fun. Let's be honest, sometimes learning English is hard work, but when I read a good story, it doesn't feel like work. I want to keep going because I want to know what happens next. The motivation comes naturally. My first steps with story learning. At first, I didn't know how to learn English with stories. I made some mistakes. In the beginning, I chose stories that were too difficult. I opened a famous English novel, but after 3 sentences, I felt lost. There were too many new words, and I couldn't follow the plot. I became frustrated, so I changed my plan. I started with graded readers. These are books written for English learners, with easier words and grammar. I bought a level 2 book called The Secret Garden. It was still interesting, but I could understand 80 to 90% of it without a dictionary. That was perfect for me. I learned new words, but I could still enjoy the story. My routine was simple. Step 1, read one chapter without stopping. Even if I didn't understand everything, I kept going. Step 2, read the same chapter again, this time underlining new words. Step 3, look up the words I really needed to know. Step 4, read the chapter a 3rd time, trying to understand more. This method helped me in 2 ways. First, I learned new vocabulary and context. Second, I improved my reading speed because I was not stopping every 2 seconds. Story listening, a game changer. After some months of reading, I discovered another method, story listening. One day, I found an audio version of The Secret Garden. I played it while I followed the text. At first, it was difficult to match the sounds to the words, but after a while, my brain got used to the rhythm of English. Listening to stories helped me in ways that reading alone could not. I learned how words are pronounced naturally. I noticed how the speaker used intonation to show emotions. I started to understand faster without translating in my head. Sometimes I listened without the book, just enjoying the sound. Other times, I listened and read at the same time. This combination made my English stronger. How stories help my speaking. At first, I thought stories were only for reading and listening, but then I discovered they could help my speaking too. When I read or listened to a story many times, some sentences stayed in my mind like music. For example, after hearing "she looked out the window and sighed" several times, I found myself using that sentence in conversation. I didn't have to think about grammar. It just came naturally. I also started retelling the stories. After finishing a short story, I would close the book and try to explain it in my own words. At first, I used simple sentences. The girl went to the garden. She found flowers. She was happy. Later, I added more details and connected sentences with because, but, and so. This retelling practice helped me in 3 ways. 1, it improved my memory of vocabulary. 2, it gave me confidence in speaking. 3, it trained me to think in English. The emotional connection. Perhaps the most powerful thing about learning English with stories is the emotional connection. I still remember reading The Little Prince. Even though the language was simple, the ideas were deep. When the little prince talked about his rose, I felt something in my heart. It wasn't just language learning, it was a human experience. This emotional connection is important for motivation. When I feel connected to a story, I want to finish it. And when I finish it, I feel proud. That pride gives me energy to start another one. If you are starting to learn English with stories, here are my personal tips. Start simple. Choose stories that match your level or just a little higher. Repeat, read, or listen to the same story several times. Each time you will understand more. Mix reading and listening. Use audiobooks with text when possible. Retell the story. Even short retellings help your speaking. Follow your interests. If you like mysteries, read mysteries. If you love romance, choose romance stories. From learner to story lover. Over time, I noticed something surprising. I was not just learning English with stories. I was falling in love with reading itself. English was no longer just a school subject. It became a doorway to other worlds, other cultures, other lives. Stories gave me more than vocabulary and grammar. They gave me new ideas, new dreams, and new ways to see the world. And it all started on that warm afternoon when I decided to close my grammar book and open a simple children's story. Chapter 2, my story, learning routine. When I first started learning English with stories, I didn't really have a plan. I simply picked up a book, read until I was tired, and then stopped. Sometimes it worked, but other times I felt lost. I didn't know how much to read each day or how to make the most of my time. So I decided to create a routine. A routine is like a roadmap. It tells you where to start, what to do next, and how to keep going. It's a habit that you repeat every day until it feels natural. This chapter is about how I built my own story learning routine, step by step, and how you can build yours too. Task step 1, choosing the right story. I learned very quickly that the right story makes all the difference. At first, I made the mistake of choosing books that were too hard because I wanted to be serious about learning. But when a story is too difficult, you stop enjoying it. You spend more time looking at the dictionary than actually reading. So now my rule is simple. I must understand at least 80% of the words without a dictionary. If I stop more than 3 times in one page to check words, the book is too hard. If it feels too easy, I still read it, because even easy stories can teach me new expressions. I usually choose graded readers, books written for English learners at different levels, short stories, because finishing something gives me motivation, stories I already know in my language, because I can guess meaning from context. Step 2. Setting time, not pages. In the past, I told myself, I will read 20 pages a day. That didn't work because some pages were harder than others. Some days, I read 20 pages in 20 minutes. Other days, I needed more than an hour. So I changed my goal from pages to time. Now I say, I will read for 30 minutes every day. This way, I don't feel stressed about finishing a certain number of pages. I just enjoy the process. Step 3. The first reading. Don't stop when I read a chapter for the first time. I don't stop for any reason. I don't check the dictionary. I don't underline words. I just read and try to understand the main idea. This is important because it trains my brain to keep moving forward, just like when listening to real conversations. In real life, we can't stop people every 2 seconds to ask, what does that mean? We have to guess from context. For example, if I read, the boy rushed into the room, his face pale. Even if I don't know the word pale, I can guess it means something about the boy's face. Maybe he is scared or sick. I can confirm later, but I don't stop in the first reading. Step 4, the second reading. Focus on details. After I finish a chapter, I read it again. This time, I underline new or interesting words, highlight useful phrases, pay attention to how sentences are built. If there are words that I see many times in the story, I write them down in my notebook. I don't try to memorize every new word, only the important ones that appear often. For example, when I read The Secret Garden, I saw hidden, key, and locked many times. These were important for the story, so I learned them well. Step 5. Listen while reading. If I can find an audiobook version, I listen while I read. This helps me in 3 ways. 1, I hear the correct pronunciation of each word. 2, I understand how native speakers use intonation. 3, my listening and reading skills grow together. Sometimes I read first, then listen. Other times I listen and read at the same time. Both methods are useful. Step 6, retelling the story. This is my favorite part of the routine. After finishing a chapter, I close the book and try to retell the story in my own words. At the beginning, my retelling was very simple. Mary found a key. She opened the door. She saw a garden. But with practice, I started adding more. Mary was curious about the garden. She found a key hidden under the soil. Slowly, she unlocked the old wooden door, and behind it, she saw a beautiful secret garden. This step improves my speaking and memory at the same time. Step 7. Using the new language. It's not enough to just know new words. I have to use them. So, when I learn new vocabulary from a story, I try to use it in my daily life. For example, after learning pale, I said, I feel pale because I didn't sleep well. After learning rush, I told my friend, I had to rush to the bus stop this morning. When I use the words, they become part of my active vocabulary. Step 8. Review and repeat. Every week, I review the words and phrases I learned from my stories. Sometimes I reread a favorite chapter or listen to it again. Repetition is the secret to remembering. I also repeat my routine for every story. Over time, it becomes a habit. I don't even have to think about it. My daily story learning schedule. Here's what a typical day looks like for me. 1. Morning, 15 minutes. Listen to part out of an audiobook while I have breakfast. 2. Afternoon, 30 minutes. Read a chapter for the first time without stopping. 3. Evening, 20 minutes. Reread the same chapter, underline new words, and retell the story out loud. It's not a lot of time, but it's consistent. And consistency is more important than doing a lot once in a while. Mistakes I learned from while building my routine, I made some mistakes, trying to understand everything. This made reading slow and boring. Choosing stories I didn't like. If I'm not interested, I won't read. Skipping retelling. Without retelling, I forgot the story quickly. Now I know better. My routine works because it's simple, interesting and repeatable. The results. After a few months, after 3 months of following my routine, I noticed big changes. My vocabulary grew naturally. I could understand spoken English faster. I started speaking in full sentences without thinking about grammar. Most importantly, I enjoyed English more than ever. I realized that when learning feels like play, progress happens faster. Final thoughts on routines. Learning English with stories is not about speed. It's about building a relationship with the language. My routine is my way of making sure I spend time with English every day. Some people think routines are boring, but I think they are like music. A song has the same rhythm from beginning to end, but we still enjoy it. My routine is my learning rhythm, and it keeps me dancing with the language. Chapter 3. The stories that changed my English. When I look back at my English learning journey, I can clearly see certain moments that made a big difference. Some of those moments were connected to people I met. Some were connected to places I visited. But many of them came from the stories I read and listened to. In this chapter, I want to share some of the stories that had the biggest impact on my English, not just in language, but also in how I see the world. Story 1. The Little Prince. The first story that really touched me was The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I had heard about this book before, but I never read it in my own language. When I saw a graded English version in the bookstore, I bought it immediately. The book is about a small boy who lives on a tiny planet. He travels to different planets, meeting strange characters, each with their own lessons about life. At first, I thought it was just a children's book. But when I started reading, I realized it had deep meaning. One sentence stayed in my mind. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Even though the grammar was simple, the message was powerful. I learned that English stories could be both easy to read and full of wisdom. I read it many times. The first time, I focused on understanding the main events. The second time, I paid attention to the way the author described feelings. Words like lonely, gentle, and precious became part of my vocabulary. I even started using them in my conversations. For example, this memory is precious to me. She spoke to me in a gentle voice. It felt amazing to take words from a story and use them in real life. Story 2, The Secret Garden. A few months later, I found another story that helped me grow, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. It's about a girl named Mary who moves to a big house in the countryside. She is lonely and unhappy until she finds a hidden garden. This story was perfect for learning descriptive language. The author used many adjectives to describe the garden: green, wild, beautiful, quiet, mysterious. I remember one sentence clearly. It seemed almost like magic, the way the garden came to life. When I read that line, I felt like I was there, smelling the flowers and hearing the birds. It taught me that English isn't just about telling facts, it's about painting pictures with words. I also practiced retelling this story many times. In the beginning, my version was short. Mary found a secret garden and took care of it. But later, it became more detailed. Mary discovered an old garden hidden behind high walls. At first, it was quiet and full of dead plants. But as she worked on it, flowers began to grow, and the garden slowly came to life. By retelling it, I practiced using the past tense, adjectives, and connecting words like but, and as. Story 3. Sherlock Holmes. After reading gentle and emotional stories, I wanted something with more action. That's when I started reading The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes is a detective who solves mysteries with his friend Dr. Watson. These stories were exciting because every chapter had a new case. They also taught me useful expressions for thinking and problem solving, like clues, small pieces of information that help you solve a problem; suspect, a person who might be guilty; deduce, to understand something by thinking carefully; I even started using Sherlock's thinking style in my own life. For example, when I lost my keys, I told myself, let's deduce where they might be. The last time I saw them was near the kitchen. It might sound funny, but using English words in my own life made them stay in my memory. Story 4, Anne of Green Gables. One of the most emotional stories I read was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. It's about an orphan girl named Anne who has a big imagination. She talks a lot and uses beautiful expressions. Reading about Anne taught me that speaking English isn't just about being correct. It's about having personality. She often used phrases like, I'm in the depths of despair. It's simply splendid. These expressions were not common in my textbooks, but they made my English sound more colorful. When I felt tired, I sometimes said to my friends, I'm in the depths of despair. Of course, I said it with a smile, so they knew I was joking. Story 5, Short Stories by O. Henry. Later, I discovered the short stories of O. Henry, a writer famous for his surprise endings. One of my favorites is The Gift of the Magi. It's about a young couple who are poor but deeply in love. They each sell something precious to buy a gift for the other, only to realize their sacrifices made the gifts useless. But their love was stronger than anything. This story taught me new vocabulary like sacrifice, precious, and irony. But more importantly, it showed me how powerful short stories can be. In just a few pages, I felt a mix of happiness and sadness. I started looking for other short stories because they were quick to read but full of meaning. How these stories changed me. Before I read these stories, English was just a school subject for me. I learned grammar rules, vocabulary lists, and reading comprehension exercises. But after reading them, I started to see English as a living thing. It was no longer just words. It was a way to feel, imagine, and connect. Each story gave me something special. The Little Prince taught me about simple words with deep meaning. The Secret Garden showed me how to describe things beautifully. Sherlock Holmes improved my problem-solving vocabulary. Anne of Green Gables gave me personality in my speech. O. Henry's stories taught me about emotion and surprise in writing. My way of reading stories. Now, because of these experiences, I now follow a certain process when I start a new story. 1. Choose a story that excites me. Interest is the most important motivation. 2. Read once without stopping, just to enjoy it. 3. Read again with focus, to collect new words and phrases. 4. Retell the story out loud or in writing. 5. Use the new expressions in daily conversations or journal entries. This process helps me learn English naturally, just like I did with my favorite books. One small story, one big change. Sometimes even a very short story can make a big change in how I think about English. Once, I read a 2-page story about a boy who wrote letters to his future self. The English was very simple, but it made me feel inspired. I even wrote my own letter to my future self in English. That exercise taught me 2 things. 1, I don't need complicated English to express deep feelings. 2, if I connect English to my personal life, I remember it much longer. Why emotional connection matters. I believe one reason these stories helped me so much is that they made me feel something. When I feel curiosity, excitement, sadness, or joy, my brain pays more attention. That means the vocabulary and grammar from the story become part of my memory without much effort. It's like meeting a new friend. If you spend a special day with them, you remember everything they said. If you just meet them in passing, you forget quickly. Looking ahead. I still have many stories I want to read in English. Some are classics, others are modern. I also want to try reading books that I loved as a child in my own language, but this time in English. Every new story feels like opening a new door. Behind that door, there are not only new words and grammar, but also new ideas, emotions, and perspectives. The best part is, I know that each story will change me a little bit, just like the ones I shared here. We've reached the end of today's lesson, and I hope you enjoyed this journey into learning English through stories as much as I did. Stories are a wonderful tool. They connect us to emotions, help us remember words naturally, and give us real-life situations to practice. If you make stories a part of your daily learning, you will see your English improve step by step. Remember, the most important thing is to keep going. Some days, learning will feel easy and fun. Other days, it might feel slow or even difficult. That's normal. Every story you listen to, every sentence you read, and every time you retell a story, you are making progress. It's like planting seeds. You may not see the results right away, but in time, you will see your skills grow. I believe in you. I know that with patience and practice, you can reach your goals. And the best part? You can enjoy the journey by filling it with stories you love. Before we go, please don't forget to click the like button if you found this lesson helpful, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss future tips and lessons. Your support really means a lot to me, and it helps our community grow bigger and stronger. Thank you so much for spending your time learning with me today. Keep reading, keep listening, and keep telling your own stories, because your English story is just beginning. See you next time.